I do believe that this is a good time to have ideas, and this is a good time to be creative, because it's going to allow you to have a competitive advantage in how you use this thing. Because when you look at it, it's really a two-dimensional square with a text box. Some people get excited there. Some people do not get excited there. It's all about the questions and the problems that you want to solve. Now, if you're a creative person and truly want to create solutions to make this world a better place, you can easily now go and experiment there and get people excited around that, create art around that, create memes around that, share around that.
But have you ever thought, what if this is all just a dream?
Welcome to Creativity Squared. Discover how creatives are collaborating with artificial intelligence in your inbox, on YouTube, and on your preferred podcast platform. Hi, I'm Helen Todd, your host, and I'm so excited to have you join the weekly conversations I'm having with amazing pioneers in the space. The intention of these conversations is to ignite our collective imagination at the intersection of AI and creativity to envision a world where artists thrive. Welcome to Creativity Squared. I am so excited today. We have Jey Van-Sharp. He's one of my favorite humans on the planet. We go way back to our New York City days. We both are New Yorkers at heart. Jey is Venezuelan and raised in New York City. And goodness, we've done so many panels and collaborations over the years. Looking back at old photos, I think our first one was in 2014 for Social Media Week on exploring deep creativity. So coming full circle, we're on a podcast that explores how creativity intersects with technology. So couldn't be more excited to have Jey, have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. Super stoked to be here.
And for those who do not know Jey, I want to give a little bit more context of his amazing mind. And I always love having conversations and just seeing what he's thinking and getting his pulse on everything. So Jey is the co-founder of MyÜberLife Consulting Group, which is a global consultancy. I mentioned he's a Venezuelan kid raised in New York City. One of his superpowers is really synthesizing data and culture, which we'll get a lot more into on today's show. And then MyÜberLife specializes in providing innovative solutions to help geniuses, creators, celebrities, executives, and companies navigate the complexities of modern business and achieve success in their endeavors. And Jey also has 2 engineering degrees, which he didn't put in his bio, but I always like to surface because he really, when I say that I love our conversations, I really do. And I'm so excited to be able to share what he's thinking about today with everyone. In this moment, the day of the recording is March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. And a little side comment. This is our second recording. So hopefully we'll have the luck of the Irish with us today, because the first recording was before South by Southwest. And we're broadcasting, or at least I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio right now, are broadcasting from Cincinnati, Ohio. And there was a torrential downpour and horrible weather. And in the middle of the podcast recording, I lost power and the internet. And the irony of doing a podcast on technology and having the technology utterly fail was so funny. So this is our second interview. And now where we find ourselves is after South by Southwest, ChatGPT-4 is out. Google is releasing their new Copilot tool, and the space is moving so fast, breakneck speed. And then also, it's not lost on me, we're also coming out of COVID, although we're still kind of in COVID, where the world paused and we reevaluated everything. And instead of slowing down, grieving what's happened, thinking about getting really clear how we want to use this technology, we're just jumping right into the next thing at full speed with this new technology that's truly going to transform the internet and our lives as we know it. So Jey, it's a big setup, but we're at a very interesting place in human history at the intersection of Yeah, just humans in this new tool. And I'd love to get your pulse on, how you see this moment and the zeitgeist right now.
Well, I would just say this, bear with me a little bit here, right? Because I have to connect some dots. But where I see the zeitgeist right now in terms of culture is that we are experiencing two things, right? We're experiencing an epic amount of levels of optimism in terms of what the future can bring. And I think at the same time, we're experiencing, extreme levels of skepticism and pessimism. I would say that, clearly we just had 3 years of very, very interesting time, and we haven't really had a conversation about it as a species, as a nation, as a society, as a community, because things are going so fast. But at the same time, here are these tools that we have now that can help us go faster, right? It's helping us to have some kind of normalcy at that speed. And I'm talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, generative learning, things of that nature. I would say also what's happening in the zeitgeist, I think people have decided to reevaluate what life is, right? Our company name is MyÜberLife, right? So it's like my super life. And I think really looking at from a lens of like, what do you do with your time, right? For 2 years with COVID, we time was distorted. Time was really relative, right? How we treated that time, how it shifted a lot of the value systems that we have as a society. And that is both on a micro level and then, of course, on the global macrocosm level. So I think right now, from my experience, there's so many different fractals of those two, ways. I think ultimately human beings are always concerned with survival. And I think that thesis has kind of evolved for a lot of people where they're thinking about quality of life, family, death, health, wellness, those things now that were looked upon as being not a part of the mainstream, not a part of productivity, not a part of creativity, are now kind of become singular in a sense, or approaching some type of singularity per se, right? Where these different non-connected ideas are now being pushed against each other through technology, through information sharing, through the way we synthesize information, and I would say also how we interpret that as human beings really is the cultural aspect, right? And the cultural aspect and how that again affects machine learning, right? Because the machines are learning from us and we're learning from the machines. So this is symbiosis happening that it's very reflective of not only of our positive psyche but also our dark psyche. I would probably say also having experience with all the different web and internet and technological iterations, particularly coming out of Web 2, I think a lot of us are looking back and with a healthy dose of skepticism. And I'll park it there, I'll land the plane there because I know we have a lot more questions, but I would tee it up there and say, this web AI is not as blissful as I would say, Twitter or Hootsuite or something of that nature, or Instagram in the beginnings where like, wow, I can edit an image. Now we're probably thinking like, how does this affect our sense of normalcy? How does this sell intellectual property? How does this affect jobs? Things of that nature.
When you mentioned Web 2, there's so many different webs, Web 2, Web 3, Web 4, that it's like I feel like a spider getting caught up in all these webs, not knowing the difference. And for our readers who may not know the difference between Web 2 and Web 3, could you just explain to everyone joining us today how you think about the differences between the different webs? So we're kind of on a vocabulary page,
sure.
On the same page.
These are loose definitions that my company uses. This is like basically our case study arc. So we start with our what affected us was like Atari, Commodore, right? Nintendo, Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, Sega Genesis, Super Famicom, all those things. The Tandy computer, Radio Shack computers, all the way to Dell, all the way to AOL chat rooms, all the way into cell phones, right? So I think all of that to cell phones is Web 1, right? I think Web 1 was the introduction of cell phones, the introduction of dial-up with AOL, and us now getting onto the internet, now speaking to each other across time and space. You know, I'm Venezuelan, so I remember right before that time having to go to the bodega in New York, you know, what we call bodegas, the corner stores, to buy calling cards, to call back home. And these were $20 cards, these $10 cards, these $5 cards. And also the trauma of calling back is like, what can you really discuss? Here are you in this different reality, you're in this different reality. And then all of a sudden now here comes dial-up, right? Now, we're now starting to like peek out. What does it mean to speak across boundaries and 24-hour clocks? And, you know, I can talk to someone in a chat room technically in Singapore, even though they might be on tomorrow and I'm on today. We're communicating and, you know, basically contracting time and space. So I think Web 1 begins there, right? Web 1 is the internet and us getting used to going to places as destinations. Before it was AOL.com, then it probably was Yahoo.com, eventually it was Google.com, right? And I think that ended and began Web 2 when the Facebook.coms and you know, the Friendsters, the Mi Gente, the Black Planets, these communities start to form on the internet, right? So not now where we were going on the internet, searching, looking, finding, discovering, connecting. And now we're like, okay, we're used to this. Now communities are starting to form based upon tastes, based upon value systems, based upon fears, based upon concerns, based upon ideas. You know, those communities start to form themselves. Of course, smart entrepreneurs, people seeing the moment, began to think, holy shit, here we are, here are these communities. Let's actually build community networks on top of the internet. So that was the birth of, you know, Facebook wasn't the first, you know, for those listening, you know, there were tons before MySpace, Friendster, you know, I mentioned Mi Gente and Black Planet. Those need to be mentioned as well, because from a cultural standpoint, you know, the Latin community, the brown and black community, you know, the LGBTQIA community back then were contributing to what was happening online, even though it wasn't mainstream, right? Of course, we landed with Facebook. Of course, I landed with Instagram. So I would say Web 1 was the internet. Web 2 was social internet. Our company really started to find its footing in Web 1, right? We decided to be a brain trust for the community, just to simply just be a place of like wisdom for the community, for the creators, for people who are, you know, ideas people, entrepreneurs, risk takers, builders. Web 2, social media, we decided to participate. And then, you know, we started to understand the intersection between community, commerce, creativity, and culture. Like, wow, this is a Venn diagram. And that Venn would be MyÜberLife. And from that position, we can give, you know, consultation. To me, Web 2 into Web 3 was, at the end of Web 2 was, which we all have experienced, was the hangover of it, right? I can't get to my followers organically. You know, I can't say what I want to say. You know, who controls the internet? These 4 or 5 companies, these FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, you know, Netflix, Google, these kind of things, these big supernodes affected the way I engage with my community. So I think that to me was the first beginnings of a cultural movement where people started to be more skeptical and more pessimistic about technological innovations, right? So, you know, that word progress trap, that phrase progress trap, where it's like, you know, we cannot just think optimistically, we also think about ownership, equity, and shared participation, and who also can benefit from these companies using our content and using our ideas and using our community energy. And to me, that was the birth of Web3, right? Web3, and these timelines didn't happen, you know, like like right away. These are probably happening simultaneously. But like to me, when the movement became culturally significant, where like the Web2 businesses and platforms and key stakeholders were like, we have to listen to the culture. To me, that was the groundswell of Web3 with blockchain, right? With that technology, the ability for that technology where people can now coexist, form community, but at the same time form economic engines on top of their cultural engines and their community engines, right? So now we can now easily distribute equity, distribute ownership, help, come together to fund ideas, to fund projects, to bring attention to projects. And of course, Web3 was supposed to be, where we're at for a long time, right? That was in the middle of COVID that happened. And, the Bitcoin stuff was part of that. But it was bigger than Bitcoin. It was bigger than Ethereum. It was really about us really understanding how this internet can work that was distributed and decentralized, right? Away from a central authority or a central node. And central authority doesn't always mean bad actors. Central authority means just one person who's biased, right? So this kind of distributed internet is the dream of a lot of the Block 3 engineers, the Block 3 artists, creatives, culturists, and just, thought leaders. And then quickly, Web 4, Web AI showed up, right? In Web 3, we decided to, as a consultancy, to really lean into that and build entities that addressed issues in our society, issues that we saw. So we decided to go away from the client and start building on our own, and start looking at ourselves as a venture company, start looking at ourselves as more of a significant investor in these ideas, bringing all of those resources from these several iterations of the web and our own consulting practice. We decided to use blockchain to, build platforms like Equity, which deals with homelessness and affordable housing, right? Something that we use to fractionalize real estate and to use that crowdfunding of people from these neighborhoods that have been ignored and use these people or share with these people an opportunity to have them buy back their own, assets in their neighborhood, and use that platform as a way to not only talk about community and share, but now use the community in a way where they can actually have ownership in their shares, ownership in their ideas, and ownership in actually buying physical real estate in the real world. And then, of course, Web AI is now next to us now, which is now, of course, the machines are talking back, per se, right? Here we are with artificial intelligence and I won't say as a robot, but I would say as a genuine assistant that requires you to know how to talk to it. But if you do, it can exponentially save you time. Not sure exactly how it can exponentially make you money, but I know for sure you can save time. And if time is more expensive than money, this is kind of how we think about it at MyÜberLife. We think, okay, it's probably worth the investment to start thinking about these tools and flow puts or throughputs or just work processes or creative processes, which led to us to expanding on our what we call the Bayard process, right? Which is our Be a Wolf About Your Dream process, which is like creating an engine where people now can take their ideas and walking through it to manifest. Now, those arcs are what's happening for us. Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Quickly, Web 1 was the internet. Atari, brands, logos. Web 1 was the internet. Web 2 was the social internet. Web 3 was the ownership being distributed and decentralized of the internet. And Web 4, to me, is intelligent navigation, where the internet and the human is now starting to merge, and information is starting to merge. So now I hate to use this word singularity because I don't want to use it out of context, but it's just such a good word to say that a lot of things that were once seemed impossible or in 2, 3, 4 months as they release this stuff to the general population have become very possible. So that was a mouthful, but I felt like that was a concise way to kind of show people where we are in terms of the historical arc over the last, 40, 50 years.
I love that. And I love, I think one thing that you said is like, we're at the intersection of culture, creativity, and community. And we're kind of at this age of intelligence now with Web 4.0 or the AI web. One thing that I want to go back to is the equity portion. I saw a tweet last night from someone at OpenAI who, in looking at the what's possible with this, and I know you and I kind of lean into, recognizing that we have to be aware of, the concerns with all this technology, but leaning into the possibilities of human expansion and potential aided by these tools. And the tweet said something about, this technology, AI, will be just a utility like water and the internet, which is great. But if we look right now, we have Flint, Michigan, who still does not have clean water. We have a digital divide where there's a lot of the country in the United States, nevertheless, looking at a global sense, that still can't access the internet, or if they do, they're, on dial-up. So we already haven't figured it out, in this Web 3 world, and we're about to accelerate into this Web 4 world. How are you thinking about equity in terms of making sure everyone benefits? I know that's a big question, but I think that's a question that we should all be really thinking about too.
Well, it's a great question, and I think right now 2 answers pop into my mind. Right, one is to create something that every person can use without thinking about the technology that's underlining it. Something that's more human, that solves a real human problem. One thing for sure, we all know housing is expensive in America. I decided with a team of other entrepreneurs, other CEOs to come together. Interesting, right? Other leaders of companies to come together to create something that would address something that affects our communities, in America. So homelessness, affordable housing. So I think if we us and companies like ourselves do things with that intent, people will have a better understanding how this technology would be used, and then use that as a case study for them on how they judge other projects, right? So that's the voice of the people dictating how it is, right? It's the essence of democracy. And I think the latter part is education. Us realizing that while we're talking all this, fun stuff, fancy stuff, and the ability to travel, the ability to share ideas, there's a huge and growing segment of the population that needs to understand what's going on here beyond their own short-term reward. So I think it's what we've been experimenting with, and was the creation of really the impetus behind our mascot of MyÜberLife, MÜLF, which is Wolf, right? As our community of progressive, like-minded people who are builders, creators, entrepreneurs who want to make the world a better place. Not just make money, but make money, having fun, and making the world a better place. And this is the whole community that surrounds and supports me, and some of you listening. But the key part of that community is education, right? And we kind of think about the etymology of education, and education really means to draw out, right? To help people to see themselves in a greater light versus forcing them to specialize, which happened the last 100 years with industrialization, and here we are in this renaissance. So I think right now the key of every single project is to treat education, culture, community as significant players as the commerce part and as the technological part as well. They need to mirror those things as well and look at those aspects as being important. What we don't want is these things to get out into society and people, because of the jargon and the syntax and the lexicon that's being used. And ironically, these same tools can help us translate this into the language that can be received by everyday people. I think that's, to me, is very, very important, because this is the only way that our democracy can extend into this space, right? Which is the people at the corner stores, at the gas stations, on the farms, at the jobs, at the offices, moms, dads, they can understand easily what these tools are and how it impacts them. And to me, that's the part that I feel like we created with Wolf University, which is a sister company to MyÜberLife, that my partner Winston knows, Professor P knows, he runs. And his concern is about providing knowledge beyond the classroom. And really what that means is like getting students and getting young people to understand what tools they need to actually progress in outside. So we work with the universities to do that. And a big part of our introduction is helping them understand the language, that the common underpinning language of technology, and use terms that they understand. So versus using jargon like machine learning, right? Just say, look, this is something that takes a lot of data, synthesizes it, and makes guesses, right? And mathematically, as we keep telling it no and yes, it makes better decisions. But these decisions should always be benchmarked against your own human intelligence. Like taking the time to know when to be concise with a thought or to expand on it, I think is very important. So I see a lot of the media, a lot of people in my life are in media, my partners in media. And again, this is not, I don't think it's all malevolence. I don't think someone's just being bad, media is bad. I just think that people tend to report from their community. But there's a general population I think we need to speak to and invest in them learning. Because if this tool is like water, as you say, and it's going to be a utility, it's going to be like electricity, it's going to be like, air, then we should get our population ready for that education. Our educational system may need to readjust. So Wolf University and, movements like ours around the country and around the world, whether it's small or big, every educator right now, I feel like they need to go back to school, per se, and learn what's happening with this. And as the world is being reimagined, understand how to take these tools to help people understand, for the sole purpose at this moment of keeping all those companies in check, right? Like, listen, what is this? You have to explain to me what this means. What happens if we have a problem? What happens? How is this going to affect labor? Like, these questions need to be addressed. So that was the long form answer of it. Short form education, and then creating things that are actually consumer friendly, right? Consumer products that we treat as fashion, we treat as consumer goods, and have people understand what this really looks like from an everyday purpose versus some Web 1 website that you enter a prompt in and it takes your information and synthesizes it. I think right now it's really high level, and that learning curve and that digital divide, there is some similarity to the digital divide and the economic divide, right? And I think the digital divide, the economic divide, and the education divide and the social divide from our data set, from analyzing, there is some synergies there, and there's some correlation there that we need to address. And I think the underpinning is education, and I don't mean it in a performative way.
I love that. And I think one thing that I've also been thinking about, you described Web3 as the decentralized web, which holds so much promise. And then Web4, the computing power needed for these AI engines are just massive. So you have like the big companies, which I think you mentioned FANG. I think Microsoft is kind of making a comeback in an interesting way. But you have these like massive companies that can afford to invest in this. So now you're going from decentralized, and maybe there's still another decentralization wave coming, but the computing power for ChatGPT through OpenAI, through, backed by Microsoft and Google Copilot and their Lambda and all that thing, you have major companies that are investing in it. And then I know one thing that you and I have talked about before is, are we going back to, I forget the author, but who wrote the information, that these companies now are sitting on all this data and determining, the safety guards that are going on it. So I'm I guess I'm curious. I think you had said something, that are they the gatekeepers to this AI? And you had said something that was really interesting, that one, you disagreed with the information. So I want to hear that. And then how the streets is culture and determines culture, and how that all fits in. So that was kind of not really a question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
I mean, thoughts don't always have to make sense. The thoughts can always be updated, right? We have the right as human beings to make mistakes and to reinterpret ourselves, right? That's something I think COVID and some of those political movements that we went through taught us as Americans. That sucks. Not getting along sucks. So let's try to figure out ways to create consensus. So I'm hoping that everyone working in this space right now, whatever part you have, whether you're media or you're a podcaster or you're an organizer or you're an activist or you're a programmer, a technologist or a CEO or a venture capitalist or private equity, we're all in this together, right? So I want to say that we should all update our consciousness to match the superintelligence that we'll have to think about that. And I also want to give honorable mention, I forget how to pronounce his name, Imad from Stable Diffusion, right? His whole thing is about open source, right? And it being more of an open artificial intelligence. So he's in the game as well with his people. So I want to throw that in the stack with Google, what's happening with Baidu as well, because they just launched something this week, what's happening, of course, with Microsoft, and what Apple is probably going to do, or to be quite frank, anyone with a data stack, right, eventually can train this model. So I just wanted to put that in its little bucket. But moving along to your question,
just real quick for the viewers who don't know and listeners who don't know what the information is, just a quick high level. The thesis of the information is that whoever controls the information controls the narrative and the zeitgeist. And that's something that you disagree with. So before you jump in and talk about the streets, I just wanted to kind of bring everyone in case that they didn't know, that thesis. So please continue.
Of course. Thank you for the meta prompt, for setting the stage. It's important to do that. I would say who controls, well, in our company, we pay attention to two economic theorems, right? One is Adam Smith's invisible hand of the market, right? Talks about this invisible hand that controls supply and demand and things of this nature. But we also, to add to that, we also follow the cool hand of the market. Is this hand that dictates cool and what's hot, what's not in, what's dope, what slaps, what these kind of cultural expressions, what's fire, what's lit. These kind of expressions are not. It's not like the communities of the world sitting down, all the black kids, all the brown kids, all the suburban kids, all the country kids, all the kids in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in Australia, in South America, in the Caribbean, Central America, Canada, everywhere, right? No one has a meeting. We're going to decide that skinny jeans are no longer cool. It's now baggy jeans, right? It's now wide leg jeans. Or, we're going to decide this kind of aesthetic is more important than the other aesthetic. We study that a lot, right? We call it the cool hand of the market. We know that the cool hand also impacts the market, just like the invisible hand, right? The invisible hand of the market is market information that tells it. But for some reason, those people think that market is not human, right? Humans control markets. So you have to look at the human. What is the human's value system? What do they consider valuable, right? That's a deeper conversation on culture, but anyone who's a part of the mainstream or part of society has been impacted by that. There's a reason why Ferraris sell the way they do, and Honda sell the way they do, and the way Kia sell. There's a reason why iPhones send a certain way, and why people make fun of people who have don't have the iPhone and the green screen or blue screen. They can tell you have an Android. All those social signals and signifiers of value and class and distinction and hierarchy and where you are in this sphere we call, Earth, are used to help tell us things about value. So we call it the cool hand of the market. It's an economic reality. And those things are not literally linear. You have to observe and listen. Now, I go back to there was a beef with Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point, which was really in the Web 2 era, the versus like the 2009, 10 entrepreneurs, big book about marketing, about how ideas diffuse. And then there was another scientist, a data scientist from Yahoo called Duncan Watts. And Duncan Watts said, hey, listen, there's some phenomenon that doesn't work through influencers. It just, it's just the time we're in. It's just boom. Someone's wearing red pants in North Dakota. Someone's wearing red pants in India. The kids are wearing red pants in Joburg, in South Africa. What's that correlation? So we got excited with that because us as a company, we consult all types of people and their ideas and their businesses, right? A lot of those people historically were in the fashion, music, fine art space, as well as in other spaces. But people in those spaces don't work the same way as people who work in financial markets or people who think they work in financial markets or think they work in another context. They're just using different prompts. Really, if you were to find a synthesis between all the different edifices, which are starting to collapse on each other, all the silos are starting to collapse. It's now H to H, human to human. I shared that theorem for MyÜberLife with one of our collaborators, Noya House, which is a community place in New York and globally. And one thing that I shared with them, I said that we are in an H to H experience. Do not look at B2B, business to business. Don't look at business B2C, business customer. Look at H to H. If you put your marketing dollars at H to H on that level, you understand the human being. So the reason why I disagree with information is because first of all, any absolute is very dangerous. Any critical mind knows that speaking in absolutes is very dangerous, right? Dunning-Kruger, there's all these biases, hindsight bias, there's affirmation bias, there's cognitive biases galore that we all have. And that doesn't make you a bad person, it just makes you an honest person when you're analyzing data, right? Particularly now that we're competing in our analysis with AI, because we're going to have to fact check AI right now. Maybe another iteration, maybe not, but even ChatGPT-4, you still have to prompt it, you still have to talk to it, you still have to set it, right? So you still need to have some information, the human language, to kind of understand. Turns out Sam Altman and everyone's talking about human language, but they're just saying culture. They're saying how we use words to describe the things that we use to share and communicate values and emotions and inspiration and ideas, how we open up our third eye and how we see ourselves bigger than we are. And what is that? What are the steps we use to do that, right? And most people don't use algebra, geometry, the quadratic formula, differential equations, financial charts, graphs. They use what they use in high school, what they use in elementary school. Like who has the best fit on, who has the best outfit, who has the best makeup on, who has the new shit, who's who and who is who. And now that as it extends now into the Web 2, Web 3, Web 4 environment of the internet, on Instagram, on TikTok, blue checks, all these things create virality, creates predictability, creates a mesmerizing effect, memes, memetics, right? And our cross-disciplinary background helps us see these patterns very easily, right? Human beings have genes, which is our genetics. Human beings also have memes, which is our memories, which is memetics. So analyzing a human being and consciousness of their genes and their memes, what are their memes? The memories come from their culture. So understanding these things and, putting a process around that to help you create insight helps you see that information is not enough. There's also this phenomenon called culture, right? The Diane Vreeland, from one of my favorite, editors from Vogue in the 70s, she said, beware of the youthquake, right? The youth doesn't care about all of your fancy, mass schemes and scams to survive. The youth doesn't care. The youth care about how they're being perceived within their context and their environment. Now their context is global. So that is a huge shift. And to be quite honest, it's a never-ending kind of thing. You have to actually be a cultural kid. You actually have to be a cool kid. And cool doesn't mean you have to be cool. It can also signify what's not cool, right? Because right now, cool can be crunchy. So like there's a way of aesthetic being communicated at grunge, found items, vintage upcycle stuff. There's communities of people around the world that think that's much cooler than buying Chanel or Gucci. While there are people who think buying Chanel and Gucci are cooler than doing that. Those people will, in fact, mark margins. They will tell you if who's going to win the bet between Google, Microsoft, Stable, whomever is playing that game, right? So we don't know what that game is, right? So the investment of $1 billion might mean 5 cents, right? Because I think with Alpaca's launch, the computational power and what it actually costs to do that significantly disrupts what ChatGPT does. And that's just like maybe weeks or a month after that they initially launched that. So we have no idea. So what I'm doing is listening, right? Humbly, I'm listening to what's happening to Adam Smith's hand, which is the capitalistic market of supply and demand, inflation, Fed rates, all that stuff that is on our media. But I'm also looking at things like, what's happening in techno? What's happening in the art world? What's happening in the fashion world? What's happening with moms? What's happening to our nation? What's happening to like our diets? What's happening to the consciousness around how people find themselves valuable, right? So I would end it here and land in saying the key phrase that I use, like, how do I define someone's value system? That prompt will tell me a lot about how those values are being defined, who is helping them define that value, and how those decisions are being made. So I think I would like to get to those people to help educate them while I'm educating these other people who work in the space so they can meet in a happy place to co-build and co-create. Because if we don't necessarily need to understand Python to use this thing, and we only need to understand human language, why don't we have humans doing that? So that's kind of what our culture data is, our trademark, our data stack is that we have our cultural data set piped into all these different cultural communities and channels and people that we pipe into to give us data visually, textually, sonically, so that we can take that information against the other information that's in abundance, which is the markets, technological innovations, use that together to really understand how our decisions are making so we can make better predictive choices, right? Of course, with our handy assistants, with technology, and of course, our wolf community, with people like yourself and people who may be listening and say, hey, what do you think about this idea? All the way, do you like this T-shirt or do you like this product? I think it still doesn't go away. I just think that human aspect, even myself, over the last 3 years, I had to mature myself as a guide, as an advisor, as a business builder, as a strategist. Like, what does that mean? So I have to get in tune with both sides of, one is probably more yang, more masculine. One is probably more yin, more feminine, more emotional. But really, it's all humans. We oscillate back and forth. Half the time, we don't know what we're doing. We're reacting to what's happening. Half the time, we're like making guesses.
I love it. I love it all. And I have so many follow-up questions. Just to punctuate one of the things that you said about the H to H, human to human, I think it's so important as this tech is just like we're opening a Pandora's box of this new wave of tech that's really going to be disruptive and transformative. I actually just started reading a book last night called Creativity, the Psychology of Discovery and Invention that someone recently recommended. And one of the things that's interesting in this kind of related to what you just said is that creativity, and I think you could also, not interchange culture here, but it doesn't happen in people's heads, but between a person's thoughts and socio-cultural context. Like you can't just like, oh, I have creative ideas. Like it's the culture has to like say, yes, that is cool. And since we are, this podcast is dedicated to the intersection of creativity and AI, I'd love to hear your thoughts or reaction to creativity and where that fits into how you think about data as culture.
Of course. I always like to reference historical, right? You have to know your roots, right? So one of the roots were Saatchi & Saatchi, I think it was Kevin Roberts. He talked about creating love marks, right? And creating love, and humans needing love and seeking love and exchanging love, and the things that we do for love, even in consuming, right? So I just want to put that as a side prompt, and this just to make it available to answer your question. And then the second part I want to say is that what is creativity? As it's the ability to create, right? Women have an advantage, right, because of just our biology, or biological women have an advantage. Emotional people have an advantage, right, because they see past obstacles. People who have been through a lot of trauma and survived are creators. Moms are creators. Dads are creators. Entrepreneurs are creators. Artists are creators. Singers are creators. Rappers are creators. If you've ever seen Kobe Bryant dribble a basketball, or, Michael Jordan dribble basketball, LeBron James, basketball, or Steph Curry dribble basketball, that's creativity, right? Or Ronaldinho and with him in a soccer ball, or Pele with the soccer ball, that's creativity, right? So I kind of want to give essence of what creativity is, so that we don't make it cliche, right? And kind of whitewash it, greenwash it, wash it with nonsense, right? Just like it's taking a circumstance and manifesting it something from your mind and making it a reality. It's the real act of creativity, right? It's something that's not visible to the human senses at the moment. Who knows what happens to it's Friday? And I just saw a tweet today from somebody on my team, and it gave all the headlines, all the highlights of what was dropped this week in technology from AI. And it said Friday, who knows what's going to happen today? So maybe today we can figure out how
I think I retweeted that tweet.
You know what I'm saying? So I just so saying creativity. So I think a big part of humanity is expression and creating out of the chaos, right? Which is like the second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy. Like, how do you create predictability in chaos? It's like a human drive, right? Like, how do we stay alive? How do we stay safe? How do we store our nuts? How do we keep our tribe, our family, our communities, our gender, our race, our nation, now our species, right? How do we keep ourselves safe? So I think that's the essence of creativity, and how it manifests itself in the modern times, that money became kind of an average of all of those things. Money became synonymous with safety. So people started using their ideas primarily on finding ways to make money, while ignoring about ways to help human beings. So I think that's going to be an interesting shift, what's going to happen now about who and what capital allocators and what ideas get funded, right? So now creativity and community and commerce plays together. And if you want to kind of extrapolate from there, you have to understand the underpinnings of that, which is culture, right? And culture is the shared value system. It's a shared expression. It's a shared way to tell you things that I find valuable. And so now I might go find those valuable, and now I might go get those things. So if you are a person selling things or sharing things, turns out that's where you want to listen to. As it comes to creativity now, I think now with AI, creators now have the best chance in that whole Atari to Web 4 kind of arc that I shared earlier on this podcast. I believe this is the first time, and my team, we believe it's the first time that creators have a competitive advantage against people who have very rigid mindsets, right? People who are in Ivy Towers, big companies, people who are fashion themselves as being conservative about their ideas. All the things we tell ourselves, all kind of AKAs for risk management, right? People who are just like, we don't want to mess up a good thing. We're winning here. Why mess it up with some weird innovation, right? However, this is like water. This is like air. So it will run through your system. Now, creators now had never had a problem with ideas. Their problem was going to get capital and getting people to give a shit. Right? by the time you get to someone with capital, they're giving you their complete biased, rigid point of view that they copied and pasted from their Harvard, Yale, wherever fund they're at, and their metric that they think is statistically safe, which clearly it's not, because if it was safe, every single bet would have yielded a return on that bet, right? So like clearly something is off with those models, and something is missing there. So the fact that those people are so sure about their models is due for disruption, right? Creators now do not necessarily need to, or less and less every day, pitch a room of people with robes and decision-making power to get funding to have their ideas, amplify or proliferate in the market or be shared or be consumed. Now these creators now can technically very, very soon go on our platform like Equity Share and take their idea or asset and get it fractionalized and crowdfunded, right? So you can do that. We literally crowdfunded our affordable housing project from the internet. Okay, that actually happened. So that's not hypothetical. I think creators also have the ability to now experiment rapidly, right? So the cost of failure has gone down almost to zero, right? And the ability to work with an assistant that doesn't necessarily get tired or you have to pay, because basically AI is like $160,000 assistant if you're in an art studio, right? AI is this thing that helps you do your thing better at this point. So I think creators now have ability to use this assistant, not robot, not overlord, but assistant to help with rigor make their idea more robust, and maybe even come work with us and put it through our Bayard system, which is one of our systems that we use to take ideas to kind of make it more pragmatic, make it more, put a business plan and get it to market to help it work. We have 17 years of experience of working with all types of companies doing that, right? So now creators have, access to things like myself, but they can also build their own process, which is their own practice. Most of my art buddies who are blue chip artists and well-known artists in the world, who kind of my art worked with them, and now they're these people who are huge, and we're their management or their advisory consultants, right? They're secret wizards in the back helping them make decisions. Now they have their AI, right? They have their own inclinations, right? They have now us, Wolf, MyÜberLife, right? The MÜLFs. We can now work together now to be that more exponentially more impactful in our ideas. So we're limiting the risk of the idea. So I think creativity now, having those systems so early on to assist the pen and paper or the business model canvas or a SWOT analysis or an abstract painting or a new song, or take my business plan and make it a rap song. It's phenomenal how the alchemy of that, the morphing and the transformation of our ideas now, there's no limitation on that versus the limitation of dealing with those people that you may have to seek out their capital and their approval, these gatekeepers, where you have to use the I and the E in the correct way. And they'll overjudge that versus the sentiment of your business plan. Or they might ignore that you have some kind of je ne sais quoi to make this thing work because of some kind of characteristic versus some kind of pseudo-intellectual equation that is supposed to be the filter of a good idea and a bad idea. That goes away more and more every day. So creators now have a lot more independence to imagineer and to imagine themselves in a new kind of format, which changed the balance of how this works. Granted, of course, if the cost of AI goes up and the cost of these things go up, that's a different conversation. But as of today, right, as of this date, that's a reality that was not real 5 months ago, where you can go into Midjourney and you can go into, Stable Diffusion's thing or Dolly or, Dale. I never can pronounce it correctly. But
I call it Dolly. I don't know either.
You know, of course, none of these things have customer service, so you could ever ask. But point is, to end it, Helen, the point is, I do believe that this is a good time to have ideas, and this is a good time to be creative, because it's going to allow you to have a competitive advantage in how you use this thing. Because when you look at it, it's really a two-dimensional square with a text box. Some people get excited there. Some people do not get excited there. It's all about the questions and the problems that you want to solve. Now, if you're a creative person and truly want to create solutions to make this world a better place, you can easily now go and experiment there and get people excited around that, create art around that, create memes around that, share around that. And, you know, a decentralized social media is, you know, there's a lot of those things happening. Decentralized platforms where Discord groups and things are happening off of the major platforms are happening in real time. So I hope I answered your question, you know, but, you know, I feel like that creativity is fundamental to humanity. And it's the fundamental aspect to economics that got zeroed out because of specialization and industrialization, that now that bag is opened back up. Like, where are the ideas? Let's fund the ideas. Let's get behind the ideas. And let's get around the ideas that we know have the highest probability to be cool and affect the culture. And if we do that, the economics will take care of itself.
A research study in Japan literally put images in front of people, then ran MRI scans, had the person think about the images, and then the computer recreated those images. Then you have companies like Neuralink, which is working on human to neural, machine interfaces, where you're going to be able to think. It's going to be the little iPhone on the back of your head as a platform for all these apps to be building on, where you're literally going to go from thinking to creating, at least in a digital space. Now, and all this wild stuff that feels like we're living in sci-fi is happening and being made right now. So I just wanted to kind of, as the time capsule of where we're sitting on the precipice of, what's to come and how transformative this is.
I mean, I think it's quite spiritual. Whatever word you want to use to replace spiritual, I do feel like there's a level of spirituality and empathy that was the first iterations of the web we were devoid of. I think now this is where the cultural element is, right? I find like a lot of people analyzing culture, health and wellness is no longer tertiary, right, or secondary. It's like, I know people who quit their jobs, moved to other cities. Teams have been distributed and redistributed in other places. People have had babies, have had kids. They have concerns. People value their time more than they value money in certain places, right? And one can argue that COVID was a spiritual awakening for a lot of people. For myself, absolutely. To have that much time to sit down, to see all the things that I've done right, I've done wrong, to see a better version of myself, to see the shadow version of myself. I think a lot of human beings have had that time. We cannot look at these innovations in a vacuum and get caught up in just the sci-fi and forget about the sci-reality, right? The sci-fi and the sci-real, right? Like, because like sci-fi is abstract and like it's either dystopian or utopian, but oftentimes in sci-reality, it's oftentimes both, right? And it's unevenly distributed and it's unfair in a lot of its aspects, right? Of course, MyÜberLife and, being a company founded by multicultural kids and our Wolf network of professionals like yourself, our job is to make sure that we ask the tough questions in the room, right? Like, okay, how does this help humanity? Tell me how this resource can be made available for free at scale for all the kids in the public school system in each of these jurisdictions, because they need to be trained on this ASAP. And not only need to be trained, we need to have funding and allocation of that, because if you don't, some other countries do. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, this is a new awakening that we need to have in America, where it's like, people are going to get smart very fast. We have a stat on our website that says something about 60% of the world's on the internet, right? So it's about approximately 40% of the world not on the internet. And with Starlink happening, what Elon's doing, and a lot of other players in the world looking to provide free internet to the world, once those people have inputs now and they have prompt access, and this is me as an immigrant kid, you know, with the blessings of coming to, and the luck of, and the good fortune of my dad bringing me to the United States of America and being raised in New York City, you know, I'm able to have empathy for all types of people, you know, of all variations. And I can tell you one thing about immigrants, right, and people who come from struggle, they have a motor, right? So those people coming from, quote unquote, third world countries, you know, as condescending as that is, can be very quickly competitive in a sense of like, what can they do with this technology? So I think America, we have to get our shit together here as well. And that's not going to come from a bunch of cats in Silicon Valley speaking in a vacuum where the majority of the people look exactly the same. It's going to happen from the ground level and from the cultural level. And that really, to me, starts with entertainment and education. And that's what our company's doing, right? So anyone that's interested in reaching out to us to collaborate on that, please do reach out. But I feel like it's the job to also respect the spiritual part, the emotional part, the humanity part as well. That conversation needs to be treated. I didn't go to South by this year, and you and I haven't had a real time to kind of download. But what I'm really interested in is to hearing the ethics and the moral part of that, because it's not clear to me, right? It's not going to be some, this is wrong, this is right. It's not that. I don't also want to bring politics into something so early and that's innovating so quickly. I just want, to me, this is not an ethical or moral problem. To me, this is a distribution problem. The distribution will help solve the ethic and moral because now you'll have more parity and people who have more access will have more input through culture and through the internet to shift what the public opinion, which I call the fourth branch of government, right? Is public, what are they? And I know there's a lot of opinions on that, but I think it has to get to maybe not even cynical adults as much as young people, right? And I mean young people and creators of all ages. They need to sit down, right? Like, yo, here's a month, and you got to kind of look at your whole situation a little bit differently. And we've been doing that with some of our clients. I'm like, listen, guys, like I know this is not, we're not a workshop-y kind of thing. We don't want to do a retreat. We try not to waste time, no frills. It's just straight to like, you know, our attitude is very, we united looking forward. We're kind of like, you know, let's help make the world a better place, and let's use everything in the fridge, right? Let's not complain. Let's use all the ingredients to make soup to feed the house. Like it's this very old school kind of immigrant mentality to our organization, how we treat our clients, right? We're like, your family, let's work, right? And you know how we work together for over a decade now, so you know that to be very consistent. But I would say, speaking to a lot of people, I find it so interesting that my phone calls with them, because I never really pitched these people. These are people who call me when they need me. I think it's time for you to sit down. I think we need to have we need to take a month out and do a real retreat. Fly, get your, and these are people who have means. I've also been doing it. Our company also does this pro bono. We do it through our educational pipe as well. I have to make honorable mention of that, of the hard work that Winston and Kwesi are doing on my team. But also, hey, all the CEOs, all the startup people, all the venture people, all the movement people who are in the head of art practices, gatekeepers, got to wake up. Because I'm not anti-gatekeeper. I'm not anti-anything per se. I'm just pro-human in a sense where, okay, what gets us to the next level where there's people now sleeping on the floor, where we have a little bit less anxiety when we wake up in the morning because we have some of our means met, and at least we're getting honest direction about how we should go about our day. Like, if it's the Hunger Games, let us know it's the Hunger Games, right? Like, if it's going to be some utopia, don't lie to us, where we completely ignore the elders in the room. So I do think this information is going to be transformative, as AI is going to be transformative. I do believe that we need to have a conversation about that tool from a very diverse cultural data set, which starts from a very, very cultural community of different people who are leaders and dreamers of parts of the world coming together and to experiment and to basically color, right? This is like kindergarten all over again, right? How do we use crayons and these alphabets to pay our rent in the next 40, 50 years, right? We need to have these conversations as a society versus just getting it on, here are the 4 or 5 things you can do with it. And then we're like, whoa. I get, okay, that these nice Steve Jobs kind of TW Triad kind of conference announcements are cool. But how does that affect my business, particularly coming out of COVID, inflation, and how does this help the nation? And how does this reinvigorate an entire working class of people who are already skeptical and pessimistic because they were not participants in the wealth transfer of Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3? Why would they get behind Web 4? And what is Web 4 without people, right? What is that? That is a spiral down to a really bad space. So I think we have to think those who build companies and who build context through our mediums, art, entrepreneurship, and all forms of creative expression, to be honest, where we're looking to make a livelihood or looking to survive and thrive. I do believe, Helen, that we have to sit down and take that process more frequent than we do at South by Southwest once a year, right? And that means that we might have to have a lot of breakout sessions all year, all the time, to update and to advance our systems and really hold each other accountable and say, hey, how are you using this tool to reach back while we reach forward? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it made me think of universal creative income, if just have our living needs met so that we can be creative with these tools. One thing I wanted to make sure that we covered in today's conversation, and I just made up the universal creative income.
Universal basic income. But I like universal creative income. It's good. That's really good.
Let us all be creators. Yeah. One thing I wanted to, because I do think that we all are creators, and that's, and I think one thing that's interesting is that when we say to be creative is to be human, is that all these tools and technology is like really holding up a mirror and asking these existential questions. If a machine can take two unrelated ideas and bring it together, in a lot of ways, that's what creativity is. Is creativity human, inherently human? Mm-hmm. So that's why I love, this moment in time is really begging us to ask a lot of these existential questions.
I think a big part of it is the teaching element. Finding out culturally how someone receives information the best is a huge part of our process. Now that I can take any information and tell it me it back in a context that is enjoyable to the subject or the person I'm trying to, the student per se, without the condescension of patriarchy kind of stuff, like to my student, to get them to be excited, so they're no longer a student, now they're a participant. That's the whole essence of our organization at Wolf. Is like, we don't want students. We want everyone to be a co-collaborator, a co-consultant, a part of the group, right? A co-builder. So, for example, this was a huge. Let me actually go to it. Let me. This is probably a good way to
let's go. Let's go.
Let's see what Papi has up his pump sleeve. So let's go here. So I had something called the Adikra codes, right? So Adikra codes are a type of computer code used to create software applications, right? They are written in the Adikra program language, which is open source programming language designed for use on the web and the mobile. And Adikra codes are used to create interactive application games and websites. Additionally, they are used to build machine learning models and data analysis tools. Okay, so no one knows what the hell that means, right? Probably. So I'm going to ask it, tell me what Adikra codes are, but tell me in a Disney narrative. Prompt Papi.
I love it.
Okay? Here we go. So, once upon a time in a faraway land, lived hold on one second. Lived a tribe of wise people known as the Dogon. These are Dogon tribe is this tribe in Africa who are technologically as advanced as ancient Egyptians, right? These are people who use their symbols and codes to actually communicate. This is binary. This is deep computer language, all the way into Africa, right? They were known for their knowledge of the universe and ability to communicate stories and wisdom through a special type of code. This code was known as the Adikra codes, and it was believed to contain the secrets of the universe. The Dogon used Adikra to communicate stories, solve problems, and express feelings. Today, the Adikra codes are used in a computer program to create interactive applications. They can be used to build machine learning models, data analysis tools with the help of these codes, right? So I'm going to ask you another question. Tell me it like, and here's a great example. What's your favorite Disney story? We all have one.
Oh, goodness. My favorite, the first one that came to mind is Beauty and the Beast.
So tell me all of this, and I'm using the word this to show how vague you can be. Tell me all of this in the Beauty and the Beast.
Well, and one thing as you're typing that to share for those who haven't played with ChatGPT, one, we encourage you to do so and ask questions and experiment with it. But it remembers what you type. So you don't have to, every time you go to a Google search, you're kind of starting over. If you can't find what you're looking for, you might tweak what you're asking Google. But whereas these chatbots remember the context of the conversation that you're having. Mm-hmm. So you can say, like what Jay just said, say this and expand or whatever. It really does in some ways. It's kind of like the movie Her, where it feels like you're almost having a human conversation to a certain extent. So yeah, just as I wanted to share that for those who haven't played around with it yet.
You giving me time to set up my prompt, right? I'm Papi here, the prompt lord. Okay, so tell me in the Disney. Tell me in Disney, in the Beauty and the Beast movie, right? Just tell it to me like how. Tell me the following. Right? This is for everyone there. Tell me the following. And I'm putting my dense text that I read for you guys about the Adikra codes. Right? And so I'm telling it to tell me the following. Right? So I said, the Adikra codes are a type of computer code used in computer software. Right? So I'm saying, tell me the following. And this is word for word. Tell me the following in the Beauty and the Beast movie narrative. Colon. Okay?
Drum roll.
Let's see what the machine says, right? So, boom. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom lived a beautiful woman named Belle, and a beast who was cursed by an enchantress, right? As Belle and the beast became closer, the beast revealed to her the secret of the Adikra codes. He told her the codes contained the wisdom and knowledge of the universe, and that they could be used to generate interactive application games and websites, as well as building machines. Belle was fascinated with the Adikra codes and decided to use them to help them to break the beast's curse. With the help of the Adikra codes, the Bell was able to create the tools needed to help the beast regain human form. In the end, the love and the power of the secret codes were able to break the spell. The beast was able to turn back into a handsome prince. So, of course, I can get more descriptive with that. I can lend that. And that was, we probably messed that up a little bit. But the point is that I can take an idea that's so dense and now walk someone into that. Now, if I go further, I can also illustrate that, right? So the secret codes are basically these codes that affect the universe that we're starting to uncover. It's like this meta code that impacts our human code. Now, it's an abstract mathematical concept that if you're deep down the rabbit hole with this kind of stuff, you probably know what I'm talking about. And ironically, if you're someone that knows cultural anthropology and history of the world, particularly the history outside of what they taught us in American schools, the Dogon tribe is quite fascinating. That's Dogon, tribe. They're quite fascinating. But they looked at the world from a world where you had these prompts that the universe gave is given through the Enigma codes. The Enigma codes govern our reality, right? So it's this kind of meta abstract thing. They told it to us in the Disney way. This thing was a way for her to find the secrets of life to help break the prince's spell. So it's the same thing that we can look at to look at the secrets of our life, to learn something to help break some of the spells in our life. Something like that. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, well, I think, two thoughts come to mind with this. Well, three, I should say. This is way cooler than the rose in the movie and in the storyline of how Belle helps the beast. And the other two thoughts are, one, and this is something that you and I have discussed before, is in order to get the most out of AI, you still have to have an expertise to know what to ask it. And that's when you say prompts are IP, you have to have a cultural understanding or whatever your expertise is to do it. And especially with the hallucinations, I actually saw my cousin's wife, who's a midwife, and I was giving her a demo last week in Texas. And we were just kind of asking it some midwife, SOP, standards of procedures, which they apparently don't use that word in the medical world. And she could evaluate and be like, oh my God, this is really good. Me not having any expertise in that world, it looks smart to me, but I don't have the expertise. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one thing with all the potential to tap into is that there's still an expertise that has to come with how to prompt and to know what questions to ask. But I think the other interesting thing about the demo, which thank you so much for doing with us, is also it opens up this possibility of anyone being able to learn in the container or story that makes sense to them. Mm-hmm. That learning or even consuming content isn't going to be linear. It will be personalized and customized to you. And I think that's really exciting. If you learn through Disney stories, these hard concepts, that's possible. If you learn through poetry or whatever, imagine that it's, yeah.
Imagine having a child who loves Little Mermaid. Right? And now you teach everything within that context. Math, science, geology, geography, economics, until they get bored with that. Right? But now they can visualize what it means within the universe that they understand in themselves. Right? Their decode codes are very abstract stuff, right? That's stuff that's probably not going to be interesting to most people. But if I tell it to you in a Disney story that how the Beauty and the Beast and how she used that to help break the spell, because it had all the codes of the universe of the beast and turned the beast back into a prince. That's a new Disney story. And now you know what the secret codes are. And the story now keeps evolving. I think also, what is prompting? I think prompting is, we came from an era in Web 1 and Web 2 where content was, what was king. But our addition is that context is queen. And to run any good,
I like that.
To run any sovereign community or kingdom or queendom and please, I'm not into hierarchies, but for the cultural understanding, using the language that's human, kingdom, queendom, right? So content, context. Prompting is providing the AI the context that you are going to be asking it to help you with. So before you start asking questions, you need to give it context. And that's when you tell it to behave in a certain way, or you will be behaving in a certain way. And it turns out people who are well-read, people who know a lot of different types of communities, people who have high levels of emotional intelligence, high levels of empathy, high levels of creativity, very self-aware people can now have a lot of narrative and a lot of IP in their minds that they can use now to work with the machine with. And I would say that the prompt analysis is not enough. The prompt also works with the ping, right? So the ping to me is where you get these aha moments. These like, eureka moments. Some people call it like divine inclinations or spiritual awakenings or, the creative imagination or the synthetic imagination revealing itself, or some people call it emergence, right? Whatever those things happen in our mind where we're like, that's it. That's the ping, right? You get the ping, now you're like, okay, now what do I do with this ping? Well, I have to uncover what this ping is, what it means, shape it. So now I prompt. Before I start prompting, I set the context. Hey, I just got a ping that I want to clean the waters of the world. Okay? Cool. Everyone, that's not a bad idea. Usually, historically, that would end with Google search. And, oh, wow, okay, that sucks. Now you can say, well, hi, act like a marine biologist with 50 years experience, act like a structural engineer, and act like a physicist, but also act like Greta, the young lady's name, who, you can tell it that, and now you set the context. And then you say, all right, build me a water filtration system, but give me 3 versions of it and give me instructions how to do that. Boom. Now, of course, you're going to get a lot of probably dense ideas. Maybe you don't understand that. Well, tell me that in a way that I can understand it. Tell me that in Disney. Right? And now I'm reading it in Disney. So now when I read it back, it's a little bit more intelligently, schematically, engineering kind of vibes. You go back to those. Okay, what they're saying here is really that. So now your brain is able to now you're speaking 2 languages. Like most of us who speak multiple languages, we're kind of already designed for this kind of like code switching. So a lot of people in the Black and brown communities, women, people who had to young people had to like switch their accents, switch the way they speak, switch their language, understand what I mean. That, you can say love. I have 90 words for love based upon the languages that I speak. And all those love nuances are different, right? The computer now may just say, give me a word for this, and they might give you love. You might say, well, no. I want you to be a master of Spanish, Portuguese, French, Dutch, English, this, American English, British English. Then now tell me words for love. You see what I'm saying? So now you're providing the context for it to give you a more nuanced answer, to give you a little bit more diversity in the answer versus like the normalcies that you have a short attention span. There's always a trigger with time. There's always a collapse of time. So you never really get into understanding. But you in your own time with this machine can help yourself learn better versus dealing with a cranky professor or an impatient parent or a parent who's just busy, or a friend who may not understand, or a textbook that's this dense that now I can take into a PDF. Take that PDF, throw it in the machine, and it tell it, being the prompt Papi, like, well, give me this in bullet points. give it back in bullet points. I think it's a fantastic kind of experience, to be quite honest.
One quote that I've been thinking a lot about since, Chat GPT specifically, I default to Chat GPT just because I've personally played with it the most, is from Michelangelo of I saw the angel in the marble and set it free, where like we can literally ask these tools anything to a certain extent, because it's for those who don't know, it's just a snapshot of the web up until 2021, at least ChatGPT is. So it's almost all of human knowledge that's scrapable online that we're pulling this from, but we have all of that at the access of our fingers, and whatever we can ask or imagine and can pull out of it and set whatever our creative angels that we want to free from this tool.
Yeah.
But two last questions, although I think we could probably talk about this all day. What does this mean for popular culture? Like if we're all having these individualized learning, entertainment, we're not too far from the future of, maybe asking it like, I'm in the mood for this type of story tonight, or even maybe a world event, tell it to me instead of, I don't know, say the CNN or GQ or Vogue version. Like you have your own, like, tell it to me through this filter because this is how I want to hear the news. And even how you described earlier, all the different fractions and microcultures, that are combining. What does this mean for popular culture and experiencing stuff across the board? We're at those water cooler talks. Hey, did you hear about this? What does this mean for all of those types of water cooler talks?
That's the $1 trillion question. When this landed, I was in the mountains of Colombia when this landed, right? When I got like pick up the phone, and I think I spoke to you and a couple of other people, and I was like, okay, let me use this right away. So I started using it right away. And I also recognized that, well, I have something on my hand that I don't know where this is going to go. And so let me be careful about who I talk about it with. So I was very excited, but at the same time, trying to be an adult, think about it, my emotions. let me be smart. But I can say short answer, I don't know completely. Mid to long term, it's probably easier to predict long term versus short to mid term. Long term, for sure, I think the people who are going to be most motivated to use these tools are the people who have, in terms of Maslow hierarchy needs, are people who have more need to survive, right? So they'll use any tool to be able to express. Much like hip hop, jazz, all the art movements, you used all the technologies that emerged over the last, arc of our history, particularly modern history, the last 100 years. I think people are going to use it in very fascinating ways. The musicians are already doing things. The poets are already doing things. I know people are already using it to have their grandfather who passed tell them stories, so like you're going to have that kind of emergence in culture. So I think the people who use music and the people who are entertainers and artists will use it first, and they will instruct us first on how this will become popular. They always do that, right? I'm to be quite honest, I'm fascinated to see what the porn community uses it, what they're going to do with that, because that whole the industry of sex, a big part of how we've gotten here as a species, the no-no word, right? They also have been a major proliferation of technologies, particularly streaming. So I'm looking at how they're going to use that, and think about how some of the major players, like the OnlyFans, and how they're going to interpret that. What it means for popular culture is that it's probably going to have its impact in two ways. One, where does it save me the most time? And two, where does it provide me the context where I'm more valuable to my community, both locally and the overall market? I think from the short to the midterm, in terms of businesses, right? Midterm to me is always like the business part. Like what would be the bet? I would say consumer-facing goods, knowledge workers and creators right now, people who create stories and storytellers should probably start getting their hands in there. People who make movies, short films, filmmakers will probably have the time of their life right now. I think people who make art will finally have a way to iterate very quickly. I think people who provide strategy and guidance and advice and synthesis and paths are going to have a good time, right? I think knowledge workers, I don't know what the brand name is going to be, but it won't be knowledge work, but it'll be people who use words to help organize human thoughts and human energies and organize communities to look in one direction, to be productive, to be able to amplify an idea, create an idea, or, take something further. We'll probably have something there. How that will affect popular culture, I think economically the working class will probably have to be retrained.
I'm going to disagree with you right there, respectfully, just because right now, I think a lot of people were wrong in that the creative and the white collar jobs were more secure. We're actually, in some ways, more easy to replace, where the robots haven't quite figured out how to fix a toilet and a lot of the stuff that's hands. Now, assisted computing will help them, and in terms of being able to amplify their jobs, but in terms of in the short term job replacement, it's more, unless you embrace the tools and whatnot to amplify what you're doing. I mean, like the industrialization of content, these tools are going to do, instead of a copywriter having to write 100 different versions of an ad, or the image in 20 different colors to A/B test. That type of stuff now these tools can do, removing the human from that.
Yeah.
And in some ways, those are the grunt work things that the creatives aren't getting excited about, but it does help pay the bills too,
I think that's a short-term problem, to be quite honest. I think after that short-term reality happens, the midterm reality would be the jobs will have to be retrained. And I don't know what the acceleration time will that be, if that's going to be 10 years, 30 years, or 2 years. I don't know what that arc is. But I agree. I actually do agree with you in the short term. A lot of people will be replaced. So I would say it's like, look at yourself, not from an aspect of you being. Don't have your ego define you as a human and your productivity based upon what you do. I think it's probably a good time to figure out why you do things and what actually is in your heart and what things actually create flow and where you lose time and space, and really figure out how that works with this new way. I'm a little older now where I'm not going to waste my time thinking about what's wrong with this thing. I'm going to think about how can we keep things safe and people more productive, particularly people in my communities and, my heritage all the way out to the people like ourselves who build things and guide people to build things. I think in the job market, in the midterm, we were due for a retraining anyway in America, right?
We're due for a lot of redoing.
Yeah, like
education, jobs, a lot.
People are not going to probably want to go to classes. So how do you get someone really quick? Like throw a VHS in the back of a classroom in a VCR to get the class edified will probably be the level of where this is going to happen in terms of retrainment. I don't think it's going to be like people lining up like Gattaca into an office and you're moving. I'm just saying, like, hey guys, you might want to think about these new jobs. And in terms of popular culture, I think the government might have to set up places in America where you can come in and say these jobs are available, and then train the people up, much like they did with the New Deal 100 years ago, and get people trained up for these new paths. I think that's going to probably happen to the mid to long term. If this keeps going that way, once we get past the new cycle of, holy shit, wow, this is amazing. Like, okay, what does it mean for the job? Like, how does this put money in my pocket? So I think that's gonna be a time where a lot of consultants who actually been building things would probably be will probably be needed. At the same time, government. I think it's going to be a time where a lot of us that were deployed to be against each other will have to sit down to really think about what the upgrade of American life looks like from a 21st century aspect. Of course, my focus is on 21st century business, but because we're pipelined into culture, my focus is also into what's happening culturally. So I think culturally, the place of the environment, just to recap, that will probably have you'll see the biggest visible change or the places that are outside of comfort. Economic comfort, social comfort, they will be the most motivated. And history has shown that. Hip hop is a great example, and the many aspects of youth culture and global culture. I think midterm, of course, the job stuff, we just iterate that. I think it's, how can you not think about that? Like, I don't know, what else would you think about in the midterm? Of course, in the midterm, there'll be other tools to make this process probably all the tools that will be needed to probably make this singularity where you and the computer is no longer separate is probably going to happen in the midterm. I just don't know what the time mark is. The short term now is that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty. And I think when there's a lot of uncertainty, it's probably a good time to go in and not out. We start with something called the why, and the why is not what you do, is why you do it, which is like your spiritual, emotional inclination. And I think we talked about this before on some of our workshops and panels and corporate retreats, and stuff like South by Southwest about creativity and like how it ties into your why and your existence. And if we were told for the last 100 years to sacrifice that for the stability of a job and a 401k and an exit plan, but since that's no longer certain, and it's going to be uncertain, you might as well look for certainty from within as you build out. So I think it's probably a good time to understand your vocation or your job or your thing. Particularly parents and educators looking at young people should really take a hard look and see where the inclinations of your student body or people are going, and use these tools to help themselves kind of say. So I think this is probably where we are in the midterm, is a reformatting of American life.
And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you last two questions related. Have you asked ChatGPT to be Walt Disney and had pretended to have a conversation? And two, what do you think Walt Disney would think about these tools? Because if you guys don't know, I'm outing Jay as a Disney Imagineering student and fan. He referenced a few different Disney things, but I'm curious because I've been kind of playing with some people that I really like who are no longer here, and even here, of having conversations of asking ChatGPT to pretend to be this person to interact. So I'm curious if you've done that yet.
I mean, what we did was ask ChatGPT to be Walt Disney. We gave it a bunch of Imagineering books. We fine-tuned it against that knowledge base and asked it to rate our business model and our entire process. And as a result of that, we upgraded our entire business model. So, I talk to Walt a lot, to be quite honest. And honestly, one of my friends and partners talk about Walt Disney a lot, bad and good. Ironically, my girl is at Disney World today, and
oh well.
it was the Shangri-La for me being an immigrant kid. One day I would be able to go to Disney, and eventually I did. But from an Imagineering standpoint, his whole concept was about taking an idea from concept and manifesting it. So for me, our whole thing about Be a Wolf About Your Dream was taking a step further than Martin Luther King. It's I have a dream. Okay, if Martin had a dream, let's be wolves about this dream. In other words, let's be community oriented. Let's look forward and let's come together as a population of people, all colors and creed sizes, all different points of views, to look forward and create something. So my whole thing is about manifesting dreams. So clearly Walt had a track record, he has the history, and it's still running. Say what you have to say about it. It's still iterating on itself. So I use some of that classical stuff, and I was very fascinated to see how I asked it to rate my business model and what it said. And I asked it to like, how would you say this better? And how would you find ways to create revenue? What things you think should be removed? What things you think are redundant? And it took us about 16 hours to edit something that I've been working on for 17 years.
Wow.
And that
Amazing.
will tell you everything about the power of this tool and how it will redefine the economics around time and how we use it. So I think I want to introduce three things as we end here is time does not equal money. Time is more expensive than money, and timing is more expensive than time. And timing can only come from one understanding their own sense of being with their own creativity and how to deploy it and use it to manifest their ideas. Being that ideas is an idea, at least in the short to midterm, that you can see will help benefit and solve a problem. Of course, not being utopian, being utopistic, I don't know, being idealistic about it. You should always benchmark and upgrade your ideas because there are always these externalities that can be negative and have negative consequences. But yeah, that's it full circle there.
I actually misheard you the first time you said timing. I heard time meaning. And I actually thought that was really beautiful of like the meaning of how we spend our time and how we define time. So I think that's a beautiful way to end today's conversation. Thank you so much for spending so much time today. I know I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope everyone who is joining does too. So thank you to our Papi prompt, or what is it, prompt Papi?
I'm still oscillating between the prompt Papi or the prompt Lord, but just
I like Papi, prompt Papi.
I think everyone should do. I wanted to say, I want to tell people not to be overwhelmed. You know, there's a lot of fuzziness with this process and a lot of uncertainty with this process. Lean into that. There's a lot of things you can uncover and discover there that not even some of the people designing the tools actually know. So lean into your creativity. But thank you for having me, Helen.
And have fun. Like, who's your Walt Disney that you want to have a conversation with and ask things? So, okay. Well, Jay and I can keep going and going. So thank you so much.
Thank you for spending some time with us today. We're just getting started and would love your support. Subscribe to Creativity Squared on your preferred podcast platform and leave a review. It really helps. And I'd love to hear your feedback. What topics are you thinking about and want to dive into more? I invite you to visit creativitysquared.com to let me know. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our free weekly newsletter so you can easily stay on top of all the latest news at the intersection of AI and creativity. Because it's so important to support artists, 10% of all revenue Creativity Squared generates will go to ArtsWave, a nationally recognized nonprofit that supports over 100 arts organizations. Become a premium newsletter subscriber or leave a tip on the website to support this project and ArtsWave. And premium newsletter subscribers will receive NFTs of episode cover art and more extras to say thank you for helping bring my dream to life. And a big, big thank you to everyone who's offered their time, energy, and encouragement and support so far. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. This show is produced and made possible by the team at Play Audio Agency. Until next week, keep creating.